Thank you. Hello. Welcome everybody on. Hi, Chana. Okay. So the last time we started going more into the booklets, and we spoke about in what way is the outlook of the idea that there's a tzaddik. Everyone agrees that there are people that are tzaddikim. The whole Chumash talks about tzaddikim. All the books of the prophets talk about tzaddikim. And throughout the generations, all the Torah we study are from teachers who are tzaddikim, they were righteous people. But we said that there's two ways to look at a righteous person. One is more on an external level, and one is a little bit deeper. On an external level, a tzaddik means someone who is serving Hashem in the most complete way, which means he observes all the commandments, doesn't violate anything, and like it says in Tanya, not in thought, not in speech, not in action, not even in thought. He is clean and clear with everything that he does. And this is a person that spends his life studying Torah, is passionate about Torah study, and he is someone who has vast knowledge of Torah, and that's what describes also character traits. He has very fine character traits. Chassidus goes more into another point, and that is that in addition to all this, and because of all this, the tzaddik is a person that the Shekhinah, which means the divine presence of Hashem, rests upon the tzaddik. In other words, in the teaching of Chassidus, it's everything we just said is true, that's the way it is. That the tzaddikim have vast knowledge of Torah. We can't even begin to understand the knowledge that they had. How much they knew, thousands of pages of Torah on their mind, by heart. We just recently celebrated the birthday of the Rabbi Marash. Just to give an example, the Rabbi Marash said when he was a little boy, he went to his father's room and to ask him for money. His father would give him spending money once a month. What did he do with his money? Most of his money he bought Torah books. Even though he was a little boy, he accumulated a library. In those days, a city like Lubavitch was a small city, and there was no such thing as a store that sold books. They would never make business. There weren't that many customers to keep a store like that in business. And there were many little places like that. How did they get Torah books? Either they would have to travel to the big city, or there was another thing. There were people that were traveling salesmen. They had a whole wagon load of Torah books, and they would travel to the small little shtetl, stop off for a day or two, and everybody would come around and buy any of the Torah books they wanted. So that day, they came to the city of Lubavitch to sell books, and he would get his spending money every month. He had nothing left. So he came to his father and he said, could you give me my money in advance for next month? So his father says, why do you want your money so in advance? What's so important? So he says, because the man who sells the Torah books is in town, and I want to buy some more books. So the Tzemach Tzedek said to him, and all the books you have, you learned them already? You know them already? That you're buying new ones? So he said, and he didn't do this out of disrespect, but you'll soon see the outcome. He said, I looked around the room. In my father's room, all the walls were covered with books from the floor to the ceiling. And then I see that the man who sells the books brought into the house another box of Sfarim. In fact, there's a carpenter that's already building a new bookcase to put the new box of Sfarim there. So I said to my father, I see you're buying a new box of books. Do you know all these books already that you're buying a new box? So Tzemach Tzedek said, test me. So he walked over to the bookcase, randomly pulled out a book, opened the book to a certain page and says, what does it say in this book on page 68? And he told him what it says in that book on page 68. Pulled out another book, and pulled out a third book, and then he stopped. So you're talking about, yes, a tzaddik is someone that has vast knowledge of Torah, has a deep understanding of Torah, has a warm heart, love for every person, refined character traits. But in addition to all that, there's something greater, and that is that the divine presence rests on the tzaddik. Just like it rests in a holy place and a holy object, it also rests on a person that's a tzaddik. So sometimes people get nervous when you talk like that. How could you associate divine presence with a human being? That doesn't sound very kosher. But the truth is, we find this in so many places in Torah, and that's why I brought these sources. So one source was from Parshas Lech Lecha. We did that already. That's the one that we had on page. We started with that. That was on page where it says that the tzaddikim, and Rashi says tzaddikim are like a chariot. Hashem, they carry Hashem. Then when we had the next page, which is page 6, and 7, where Rashi says that Hashem's presence is in the tent of Moshe. And then we had the one on page 7, where Paro's daughter found the little baby Moshe in a little basket, and it says that she saw him, and Rashi says she saw the Shekhinah. So let's go now to page 8. We'll see again something similar. It says in the pasuk on top of the page, this is the story when Moshe was coming to take the Jews out of Egypt, and his father-in-law Yisro came, and Moshe made a big feast to honor him. So look at the top of the page, it says, Yisro, Moshe's father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and a peace offering to Hashem. Aaron and all the elders came out to eat bread with Yisro, Moshe's father-in-law, and they ate the bread before God. What does before God mean? It doesn't mention anything about Hashem. So let's look at the bottom of the page at Rashi. From here we learn that when a person partakes in a meal with Torah scholars are present, it is considered as if he had pleasure from the splendor of the Shekhinah. In other words, a tzaddik is a person that the divine presence rests on the tzaddik. And not only that, but as a result of that, when he's sitting by a table, even the food absorbs in it a certain presence of godliness. And then when you eat it, you're absorbing this godly light and godly energy. And then you have on page 9, this is a term that we find in the Chumash, and we find it in numerous places in Tanakh and the books of prophets, and we find it in Tehillim and Psalms. What does it say? This is the blessing that on page 9 that Moshe blessed. Who was Moshe? The man of God, or as a godly man. Of course, the simple way you can interpret that means that he was a man that spoke to God. But nevertheless, it says Ish Elokim, a godly man, means he was a person that godliness dwelled upon him. And this explains what we see in the next part. The next page, which is page 10, what you're looking at is halacha. This is Rambam, Maimonides, halacha, and these are the laws of how to respect Torah scholars. And it says the following. I didn't underline the English. I underlined the Hebrew. So look at the other side of the page where you have the English. And he says like this, in the middle of the page. There is no greater honor than the honor that's due to a teacher, meaning a Torah teacher. No greater awe than the awe that one should have for his Torah teacher. In fact, our sages said, your fear of your teacher should be equivalent to your fear of heaven. And therefore, whoever disputes the authority of his teacher, it's considered as if he's revolting against the divine presence. Because it says in the Chumash, people led a revolt against Moshe, but what does it say in the Torah? They led a revolt against Hashem. Why? Because the divine presence rests on Moshe. And then it goes on to say, whoever engages in controversy with his teacher is considered as if he's engaging in controversy with the divine presence. And brings another verse to support that. Whoever complains against his teacher, meaning again a Torah teacher, it's considered as if he's complaining against the divine presence. Because that's what happened with Moshe. And whoever thinks despairingly of his teacher means having doubts whether his teacher is really honest, whether I can trust him. And it's as if he's having these thoughts and doubts about Hashem himself. In other words, once we understand that a tzaddik is a person that's a righteous person, and because of his holiness, Hashem's presence dwells on him, that when he says something and he requests something and he makes a statement, in a sense, he's just an amplifier that Hashem speaks through this person. And by going against him, in essence, they were going against Hashem. So in the Chumash, it says that these people were arguing with Hashem. They had doubts in Hashem, even though if you were to ask them, they would say, no, we believe in Hashem. We just don't trust Moshe. We're against him. But the Torah says and teaches us, if somebody is against Moshe, then in essence, they're against Hashem. The next page, which is page 12, the same thing, but this is in the Shulchan Aruch. What I showed you before was in Rambam, Maimonides. This is in the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch is code of Jewish law, and it has the same thing, that these are the laws pertaining to a teacher of Torah, and obviously not just any teacher, but a teacher who's like a tzaddik, a righteous person, that if you argue against him, if you have doubts, if you complain against him, all these things, it's like you're doubting and going against the divine presence. And you find these words also in Rashi and Chumash. That's on page 12a, the next page. Moshe Rabbeinu is speaking to Yeshua, who was his successor, and he said to him, B'char lanu anoshim, choose for us people. When he said choose for us, he sort of equated himself with Yeshua. So from here we learn, where it says, and our sages say this in Pirkei Avos, that the honor of your student should be dear to you like your own. But then it goes on to say, and the honor of your friend should be like the reverence you feel to your teacher. And then it goes on to say, and the honor and reverence that you feel for your teacher of Torah should be, next page, like the honor and reverence you have to Hashem. And brought down the pasuk where it says that these people, they rebel against Moshe, they deserve to be removed because they rebelled against Hashem. Again, clearly saying that rebellion against Moshe is rebellion against Hashem. There's more here, this is only in Hebrew, so maybe I'm just going to skip it. And we'll go to the next part, which will help us understand it a little bit better. So what we're saying is, and this will help us understand that there's a divine presence in a place like a Beis HaMikdash, and there's a divine presence in a shul, and there's a divine presence within the Torah scrolls, and in the same way, there's a divine presence in a person who is a tzaddik. And when you study Chassidic, you find out there's even more to it. That actually there's a divine presence of Hashem in every person. The only difference is a tzaddik, because he's a righteous person, that divine presence is revealed. And with every person, it's more concealed. But in essence, Hashem rests upon every single person, especially those that are in the category of tzaddikim. So this is explaining, because one of the questions people have about a Rebbe is, it's one thing that you respect the Rebbe, but the Chassidim, they go past that. They're very focused on the Rebbe. They talk about him all the time, and they always talk about being connected to him. Why is that going overboard? There are a lot of people out there that they know of tzaddikim, and they live in America, and they know there's a certain tzaddik living in Israel, and their lives and that tzaddik really have no special connection. Chassidim are very different. They're very involved with their relationship with their Rebbe. So how could you explain that? So one of the ways of explaining it is by what it says here on page 19. We'll go into a little bit of a new chapter. And that is that the Gemara says, and we'll soon see the sources, that a tzaddik is equivalent to the Beis Hamikdash, to the temple. When you think of the Beis Hamikdash, the same thought comes to mind. There's one thing to say the Beis Hamikdash is a holy place, but Jewish life almost totally revolved around the Beis Hamikdash. And when the times when the Beis Hamikdash was standing, there was a mitzvah to go there 3 times a year. The 3 times a year was Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, the 3 holidays. And let's remember that when they went there, the mitzvah was to go by foot. They weren't supposed to be traveling with a vehicle. They were supposed to go by foot. And it took up to 2 weeks to get there for some people. Those who lived farther away, it took them 2 weeks to get there. So could you imagine a person travels 2 weeks to get to the Beis Hamikdash for Pesach, spends a week in the Beis Hamikdash, then travels another 2 weeks to get back home, then travels another 2 weeks to get there for Shavuos, then travels another 2 weeks to get back home, then travels another 2 weeks to get there for Sukkot, and then another 2 weeks to get back home and spends a week there. That means people would spend approximately 14 weeks of the year, or maybe 12 weeks of the year in the Beis Hamikdash. And that's so much time that is being consumed just from traveling. So it must be that going to the Beis Hamikdash was something so essential, was something so important, something that made such a huge difference, so crucial to our Yiddishkeit, that it was worth it to make all these trips and lose all this time and go to the Beis Hamikdash. And we see it now also. Now when we talk about Mashiach, one of the things we keep emphasizing more than anything else is the Beis Hamikdash. That the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. And that's why we mourn on Tisha B'Av, because the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. In fact, I think if you would stop the average Jewish child, the one who goes to yeshiva, and you say, what happened on Tisha B'Av, what do you think they would say? They wouldn't say hundreds of thousands of people were massacred. They wouldn't say that hundreds of thousands of people were tied into chains and taken away as slaves and beaten. Probably the first words to come out of their mouth is, the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. After all, it's only a building. How could you compare that to the other things? And yet, this seems to be all the way on top of the list. So clearly, Beis Hamikdash standing or being destroyed is like crucial to everything in Yiddishkeit, to the extent that it wasn't just enough that it was there, but our lives were very involved with going there, coming there, going again and again throughout the year, so many different times. So the question is, let's understand a little bit better what the Beis Hamikdash was all about. And once we understand that, we'll understand what a tzaddik is about, because a tzaddik and Beis Hamikdash are equal, are equivalent. So first, let me show the source where it says in the Torah that a tzaddik is equivalent to the Beis Hamikdash. So let's turn to page 20. Again, only a part that's underlined is the Hebrew, but you can see the opposite side of the page. You're reading Rambam, also laws of Torah study, and the respect we're supposed to have for Torah teachers. So number 7, the Rambam writes as follows: a person is obligated to stand before his teacher from the time he sees him, as far as he can see him, until he passes. Then he says, a person is obligated to visit his teacher during the festivals. Where does this come from? What's this obligation that I must visit my Torah teacher during the festivals? So you look at the bottom in the notes, you'll see that just like it was a commandment and a mitzvah to visit the Beis Hamikdash during the festivals, so in the same way, it's a mitzvah to visit your Rebbe during the festivals. So this is one of the sources that seemingly makes it very clear that there's a comparison here. We're drawing a parallel between the tzaddik and the Beis Hamikdash. And therefore, just like the Beis Hamikdash needed to be visited during the festivals, in the same way we visit a tzaddik. And this is, by the way, the source of the Chassidic custom that Chassidim go to their Rebbe for the holidays. You don't find this in other circles, but mainly in Chassidic circles, people will go to the Rebbe, will even travel overseas to be by their Rebbe for the holidays. And there's another source. This is the Gemara, and the part that's underlined. I don't know if it's important to go into the pieces before, but it talks about the wording in a certain pasuk, in a certain verse in the Torah. And these are the words of the Gemara, the one that's underlined. Those words in the Torah are to teach us something. What is it? It teaches us that the death of the righteous is equivalent to the burning of the house of our God. So when a righteous person passes away, this is equivalent to the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. So what does that mean? When a righteous person is alive and functioning and doing things that he does, that's equivalent to the services in the Beis Hamikdash. So here again we see the parallel being drawn between a tzaddik and the Beis Hamikdash. That's one and the same. Then you have another story here. There was a person in Jewish history, his name was Hurdus. And he was someone who was a dictator. He wasn't allowed to use, this is in the time when the Romans were ruling, and he wasn't allowed to, according to Allah, become a king. And he went and he took the throne by force. And not only that, but he actually executed all the rabbis, because the rabbis were saying that according to the Torah, he's not allowed to be a king. So instead of arguing with them and proving his point that he's right, he had a better solution: just execute them, and there is no voice that's saying that my position as a king is not legitimate. He left one of the sages alive because he was related to him, but to make sure that he doesn't get too much in his way, even though he left him live, he blinded him. His name was Baba Ben Buta. And here's a story in Gemara about this individual, that one day he regretted what he did. He felt bad that he killed all the sages, and he pretended that he was just an ordinary person, and he came to Baba Ben Buta as a sage, and he said to him, what do you think, what could this person do to do tshuva? So look at the top of the page. It says like this. Look at the English part, which says, one day Herod came and sat before Baba Ben Buta. You see that? It's the second paragraph. He pretended to be a commoner. He didn't identify himself as the king, and he's blind, so he wouldn't know anyway. And he said, look what this servant, look what this slave, what he did. He did such a terrible thing against the king. So Baba Ben Buta said to him, so what do you want? What should I do? What do you want from me? So he said, you should curse him. He's a very great person. So your words carry a lot of power. Curse him. He deserves to be cursed. So he answered him, there's a verse that says, even in your thoughts, do not curse a king. So he says back to him, but he's not a true king. He took the throne by force. He's a dictator. So he said to him, well, even if he's not a king, even if it would be just a wealthy person, there's also a pasuk that says, even in your bedroom, when nobody's around, don't curse a rich person. Even if it was just a prince, not a king, there's another verse that says, don't curse a prince. He has a position of leadership. So this person's arguing with him, and he says, but doesn't that say only if the person's acting like the way you're supposed to according to Torah? He's not, so you're allowed to curse him. At the bottom of the page, he says to him, I'm afraid of cursing him. So the man said, don't be afraid, there's nobody here. Just me and you. So he said to him, there's another pasuk that says that the birds in the sky could carry the sound and winged creatures could betray the matter. In other words, somehow or other, word will get to him if I, God forbid, will verbalize a curse against him. And at this point, he sort of exposed himself. And he said, he was really amazed at his self-control. You can imagine how much he must have hated him if he killed all the sages. He executed them. and he blinded him, and yet he's not ready to execute him. And he said, if I would have known that the rabbis are so exceptional, I never would have killed them. And I feel remorse. What can I do? That was his question. What can I do to correct what I've done? So this was his answer. This is the paragraph that begins with the words, Baba replied allegorically. Being that you or he extinguished the light of the world because he annihilated these great sages, and they're compared to light because it says, Ner mitzvah Torah. The Torah is compared to light. So what he should do is, he should go and rebuild the light of the world, which is the Beis HaMikdash. There's a verse that says, and all the non-Jews of the world, all the nations of the world, will be drawn to the Beis HaMikdash like people are drawn to light. So if he extinguished the light, let him relight the light. In other words, rebuild the Beis HaMikdash, beautify the Beis HaMikdash, and that'll be your tshuva. There's another opinion that he says something a little bit different. He said he blinded the world. Why? Because the sages are called the eyes of the community. In the Torah, there's a term where it says the eyes of the community, and it means the sages. Because just like the eyes, they provide us with the ability to see, to know which way to go, not to fall into a hole, not to crash into a wall, to stay away from danger and go in the right direction. The Torah is that way. So therefore, people who are masters of Torah are called the eyes. Being that you blinded the eyes of the world, so you should go ahead and correct and rebuild the eyes of the nation, which is the Beis HaMikdash.
King Herod was Jewish?
What?
King Herod was Jewish?
No, that was part of the problem. First he was a slave, then he became freed, but he wasn't qualified to become a slave that becomes freed, could become Jewish, but he wasn't qualified to be a king. So basically, what do we see here? He killed the sages. The way to replace it is by the Beis HaMikdash. And actually, he built the Beis HaMikdash. And the Gemara says that the beauty of this Beis HaMikdash is beyond description. And whoever didn't merit to see the Beis HaMikdash that he built never saw a beautiful edifice in his life. If you go to Israel today and you look around, they'll show you this is parts from his building that he built, the Beis HaMikdash of Herod. And then we'll have, so these are the sources that the Beis HaMikdash and the Tzaddik is the same, one and the same idea. So we'll go into the next class, we'll go into understanding, so what is the Beis HaMikdash? How do you understand the real depth and meaning of the Beis HaMikdash? And from then we'll get a better and deeper understanding of the meaning and the purpose of the Tzaddik. To be continued, and happy Lag Bomer, everybody. Enjoy.
Thank you, Rabbi. Have a good day.
Yeah.